Welcome back, Twisters, and hey there, hockey fans. Nick here. Today we're going to talk about the Edmonton Oilers goaltending situation. As we just saw in a recent game against the Calgary Flames, the team lost 9-5. Yes, it was basically a baseball score out there. The Flames scoring all 9 of their goals, even strength. And no matter who the Oilers have been putting in net, they really just haven't had consistent goaltending for a full season. You have, of course, Mikko Koskinen. You have Mike Smith. You also have Stuart Skinner. Yeah, once in a while, these guys can turn it on, but over the course of an 82-game season, they just haven't had that steady netminder. So I'm going to talk to an Oilers super fan. This is Peyton from the channel Peyton On The Radio. So go check him out. See the description down below. Show him some love, guys. I'm sure he would enjoy your support because he's putting out all sorts of content on the Edmonton Oilers, especially live streams and game recaps out there, in addition to some NHL 22 content. So he's joining me. We're talking about goaltending. We're talking about the defensive situation. We're talking about the trade deadline as well and what moves they could have made. So really, I wanted to pick his brain and besides go inside the numbers, really hear from an Edmonton Oilers fan himself. Of course, we want to know your thoughts on the Oilers down in the comments down below. So if you were Jay Woodcroft, who would you start in a playoff series right now? Would you start Koskinen, Skinner, or Mike Smith? And if you enjoy all things NHL analysis and history and culture, be sure to hit that red subscribe button down below. Join our growing hockey community here. And without further ado, let's go to my segment with Peyton. All right, Twisters. Well, I'm joined now by Peyton from the YouTube channel Peyton On The Radio. Why don't you introduce yourself, Peyton? Welcome to the stream, or welcome to the channel, and let us know what you like to cover on your channel.
Oh, hey there, guys. Yeah, I cover a pretty good amount of stuff. I right now been doing OGRs, which is my Oilers game reactions. So I review every single Oilers game, and I've been doing it for the past 3 years now. Pretty rough 3 years as well. And then I've been doing play-by-play streams. I also do some franchise modes on NHL, all the NHL games. So I've been doing that recently. And I'm going to start doing some baseball content here soon for the Blue Jays as well. So that's going to be starting up this summer as well.
Fantastic. Well, it's a good thing that you decided to get started when you guys still had McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah.
It's not like you were covering them, 10 years ago when Dallas Aikens was the head coach.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad, but at the exact same time, I still have to suffer through the fact that we have very mediocre GM that can't build a team a lot around McDavid. That's like the worst part about it.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's a similar playing field with the Toronto Maple Leafs where you have all that talent, but you just can't buy around to save your lives. And I wanted to ask you this at some point in this conversation, but I'll bring it up now since you mentioned it. So how receptive are the Oilers fans to the moves that were made at the trade deadline? The big moves really here, we're bringing in Brett Kulak and also bringing in Derek Brassard. What is sort of the pulse of the Oilers community out there?
It's a split between this community. It's quite funny. Like there's a lot of fans that really, really love Holland and will just support everything that Holland does. And then you have the other side where they just completely, utterly disagree, which then just ends up making the fans argue between each other. I personally like the moves, and I think most of the Oilers fans like the moves that Ken Holland did this trade deadline for the very first time in a long time, where we actually kind of agreed that we actually picked up 2 players that helped the team. But there's a lot of fans, especially me, that think, why didn't we go all in when, there's a really big holes in our defensive core. Kulak, he's only going to fix a little bit of it. It's not going to fix it fully, especially when we have such a weak right-hand side with CC, Barry, and Bouchard up there. Like we wanted more, but I guess this is what we get. And I wanted more because we know that we're going to lose in the first round, most likely. So it's like, why trade for anything when you just know you're going to fail in the first round anyways?
But your first round opponent is the Kings. They haven't exactly been lighting it up the past 4 years. So you would think that maybe they would at least try to upgrade a little bit more sizably, I would think, to have a chance at winning a round, because LA, as you saw at the trade deadline, all they did was get Troy Stetcher. And that was because basically they had a defenseman on IR and they have Doughty who's been out too.
And I could see that we could definitely take advantage of the LA Kings. Like this is like one of the teams that I feel pretty confident going into in the first round. And that's why, like, I thought like we have McDavid here, like we should be going all in. You're seeing teams like Florida making some massive moves. Like so many other teams are making bigger moves than what we are, but we're afraid to trade away a first round pick because of development. It's Holland being an idiot at some moments of time with it, because like we want to go out there and pick up, a big piece for the team, but he wants to draft and develop prospects that won't be here for 4 to 5 years. And how many more years are we really going to have a McDavid and Draisaitl? That's like the biggest question going through my mind.
What are your thoughts on the Oilers not making any moves to improve their goaltending situation at the trade deadline?
It was tough. There's not a whole lot of options. That's what I kind of dumbed it down to.
True.
Fleury was available, but like that was the thing. Was he going to waive his no trade clause to us? That was like the biggest thing.
I didn't
But
think
like,
he was going to go to a Canadian team either. I mean,
no,
God, Minnesota is right there with Chicago. It's a 6.5-hour drive. I've made the drive myself.
yeah, it's not that far of a drive, and like he's really close to his family. And if you go all the way to Edmonton, that's way farther than what it would be when you're going to Minnesota. And that was the biggest thing. It's just like, who do you upgrade? You got Gorgiev, but is Gorgiev really better than either Smith or Koskinen? My honest opinion is I want to see Skinner. I really badly want to see Skinner up right now because we're not getting consistent goaltending out of Koskinen. There's some moments where he just looks absolutely amazing. And then there's other moments where he just isn't that guy. And Smith has just not been that guy this year. He's been looking really clunky in the net, not looking very good. I don't know if it's just his injuries or what it may be, but I think maybe Skinner might be our best bet right now, but it was disappointing not seeing any goaltending changes. I wanted to see something during the offseason, though. That's the time to really change your goaltending.
I see. Yeah, certainly some inconsistency there with Koskinen and also Mike Smith, although he's a battler and he's turned it on in the playoffs before. I've seen him, do that in the net with the Calgary Flames of all teams. But then you look at somebody like Stuart Skinner, where statistically, yeah, he's having the best season. But I was looking at the recent numbers for these guys. You've got Smith in the 4 games that he has since returning from injury, he's given up 10 goals in those 4 games and has a .913 save. Then you have Stuart Skinner in his last 8, not so good, where he's at .895 save.
Yeah.
His goals against is a little bit under 3. And Koskinen, well, we can't even really get into him so much. So you kind of alluded to this already, even though he's not playing particularly well right now. If you are Jay Woodcroft, former assistant under Todd McClellan, would you be confident in rolling with Skinner in the playoffs? And also to kind of add to that, how do you sort of manage the goaltending through the rest of the season as well? Because at this point, you're not a lock to make the playoffs, even though you might be somewhat comfortably in that position.
Yeah, it's really tough with the goaltending. Like I've thought about it a ton. It's like really hard to think of like a solution to what we got with our goaltending right now. I always date back like where I'm like, man, I wish we got Markstrom. Like in my head when we were looking at Markstrom, I'm like, man, we shouldn't sign him. We shouldn't get him. He's going to be bad. Goalies are voodoo. And we ended up not getting him. And now he has like 9 shutouts this year for the Flames. So for a solution, and that's the thing, like Skinner's been phenomenal in the AHL, and like will he be good coming up into the NHL and getting that consistent amount of starts and going up against good teams, especially if he's going into the playoffs? Do you want to rely on Skinner, or do you want to go with someone like a Koskinen or Smith? That's the biggest question. You got to play who's hot, and right now we don't have any goalies who's hot. I would almost like us to play all 3 goalies and say like, who play the hot hand. Of course, we don't have a whole lot of cap, and I think that's a big problem with us too, calling up a 3rd goalie and going with that. I would like to see us rotate 3 goalies just to see who's hot. If Mikko Koskinen's not feeling confident that night, you play either Smith or Skinner. But I don't think there's any solution with what we do with our goaltending. I think our goaltending will probably be what kills us this upcoming playoff run, or even our playoff chances if we don't get that good goaltending coming up here.
Have you seen them try to maybe do a little bit too much out there? Have you seen them challenge shooters a little bit more or play a little bit more further back in their crease? How have the goaltenders from your eye test sort of responded to the shifting landscape in the team's defense?
Yeah, like you can see, I think with Koskinen, there was a few plays where he just overbit on some plays. Sure, Mike Smith plays really deep into his crease. I see that a lot with Mike Smith, where he plays really deep into his crease. And Koskinen, it depends on him. Like with Koskinen, it's all dependent on his confidence with Koskinen. Like if he's looking confident, he looks like he's a Vezina winning goalie and he's making the big saves and he's sprawling all over the place, robbing. And that's, I think the biggest thing is like these goalies, they can only bail you out for so long. And then they just start making those mistakes. like what we've been seeing with Koskinen, where some games he just looks terrific. He's challenging people. He's out front of his crease. And then there's other times where he's just sprawling, not knowing where to be, not able to see where, that puck is going to go. His glove hand's still really weak. He's improved upon it this year, but there's some games where his confidence is shot and just can't save with that glove. Smith, sometimes he overplays the puck. He's really confident with the puck, but sometimes he overplays it. And this year, I would probably have to say this year has been really bad for him puck handling the puck. There's been like multiple times where I see him turn it over worse than what it was last year. Smith's game completely changed from what it was last year to this year. Smith looked really confident in the net. He was challenging a lot. He was looking really good this year. I don't know if it's just the injuries, which I believe it is, because Smith is pushing through something. We all know he's a battler. He's a warrior. Yes. That's what he's been named out to be. And that's what he's looking like he's doing. He looks like he's battling through something right now. And he's just not looking, he's looking clunky is the best way to put it for Smith.
Well, it's kind of interesting because when you least expect it, that's when he starts turning it on. So he could look like ass for the rest of the year. And then for all we know, he could be the Jonathan Quick in that series against the LA Kings. And then we'll see what happens.
Is that?
When I watched your video recapping that game against the Flames most recently, when you guys, let in 9 against them, all even strength, right? You were carving a new one into the defense for the Edmonton Oilers, and justifiably so. I went back, I was like, well, God, it must be the goaltending. And I look at initially Koskinen, and maybe the first goal I think was probably the weakest of the 5 that he let in. And then otherwise he was just hung out to dry. And then you go to Smith, that's a little bit of a different story. But again, you see that this defense is setting their goaltenders up for failure. So when you really think of who to point the finger to, it is not just the guy between the pipes at all. What are your thoughts to kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, like I blame the D more than anything on the goaltenders. Like I know there's a lot of Oilers fans that blame the goaltending more than anything, but when I played hockey, I was mostly a defenseman myself, so I usually focus on the defense all the time. This past game was just really bad for us. Like you have 3 right-handed guys. You got CC, who just does not do good against top talent. He's a good, 4 or 5 defenseman, but
statistically, he's been part of maybe the Oilers' best pairing this season too.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, he has been. It's just the problem is when you're playing him against top talent 24/7, and he's playing that, that top pairing, he doesn't do phenomenal. And without a doubt, he's been one of our best right-handed guys. Then you got Bouchard, who's just pure offensive defenseman, and that's the same with Barrie. So there's not a lot of options that you can, change the defensive core around. Barrie and Nurse don't play very good alongside of each other, and you don't want to be playing Keith and Barrie alongside of each other. So Holland kind of built himself a defensive core where you have to stay with certain pairings because you can't really jungle things up. If a pairing's not working alongside of each other, then you might just mess up the entire defensive core, which is what we've seen. Kulak and Barrie, I got to say, they've had 2 really good games, but once you took Barrie away from Kulak and threw him alongside of Nurse, they just look really bad. And that was the same. CC looked really good alongside of Kulak. It's just our defensive core is a real big mess. And especially in that game, we made so many mistakes where we left Kachuk wide open in front of the net.
Yeah, really.
Or we decided Nurse was deciding to go for a hit or step up way too late and then left CC all alone. And then CC was just off in La La Land.
And I haven't really watched the Oilers all that much this season, but I even noticed in that last game too, you do have those plays where you're in a transitional situation and your forwards are not recognizing that there could be some trailer, coming in late in the play to stuff the puck home. So we even saw that a couple of times as well.
Yeah, our rush defense, especially when it was under Tippett, our rush defense sucks. Like we gave up like a lot of breakaways as you've seen in that Calgary game, but that's been like most of this year where we just can't read the transition game or the rush game. We seem to get beat and we can't read that there's going to be a player that's going to be trailing and going right behind you on a breakaway. And that's a big thing, or even just the fact of not being able to handle the puck very well either.
So I actually asked our viewers, how far would the Oilers advance in the playoffs given their current goaltending performances? So far I have 88 votes and 58% say the Oilers will be out in the first round. 30% say they could win a round or 2. 11% said they'll miss the playoffs entirely. What are your thoughts on that?
See, It's been up and down for me this year. When we were in Tippett, I was like, oh, we're not gonna make it to the playoffs. Woodcroft, I'm like, oh, we can maybe win a round or two. And now I'm just like, maybe not make it to the playoffs or losing the first round. It goes in between. It depends on how hot our goaltending is and how hot our defense goes. And that's like the biggest thing. Like we're like this year, the best way to sum it up, it's been one big roller coaster this year. Like the past two OGRs, like the two seasons, have been like very consistent years where we play pretty well. There's like
Yes.
not too much roller coasting this year. It's just like I feel happy for a week and then just a whole week where I'm just like, what are we doing defensively? Like we have no goaltending here. Like I don't know what's going on. And that's why it's so hard to predict what's going to happen with this team.
The personnel wasn't shifted so much between the off seasons. And I've been saying this in my content as well. The Oilers were arguably the NHL's most consistent team the last 2 years, especially among Canadian teams. So how do they go from being consistently good and steady, right? I would rather have that than a team that wins 7 games in a row and then loses 4 in a row.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like I noticed there was really big holes with Tippett's coaching, and he just didn't fit the team perfectly. And you could started seeing that last year, and that's why this year it seemed like we just lost that inconsistency. And also our defense has gradually become worse and worse over the past few years. Like Barry has gradually declined in his game defensively. Offensively, he's all right, but his defensive game is something to be talked about. You know, then you also pick up Keith who, yeah, sure, leadership is great, but when the guy can't really play that well out there, and especially since he's playing top 4 minutes, and especially when Tippett was coaching him, he was playing like top of the line minutes. And right now, Keith, he can't handle a lot of minutes. Like you've been seeing his game go from like, all right, and it just kind of slowly goes down throughout the year with the more minutes that he was playing. And that's like something I predicted at the start of the year.
And Peyton, what are your channel's plans for the rest of this regular season and the postseason? What do you have in mind for YouTube?
Well, I got a lot of stuff coming up. We're going to be doing, of course, continue doing the OGRs for the rest of the year, and then hopefully do it in the playoffs as well. But going towards the playoffs, if the others get eliminated or don't make it into the playoffs, I'll be reacting to every single day. I'll be doing like reactions to every single game throughout the playoffs, and I'll be doing live streams all the time for almost every single playoff game if I can. So I'll be live streaming a lot throughout the playoffs, which I am absolutely pumped. Cannot wait.
Fantastic, man. Well, you keep up what you're doing there, and I'll be sure to send as many people as I can to your channel. Can we also find you on social media?
Yeah, you could follow me on Peyton Radio on Twitter. I also have a Discord channel if you want to go check that out. When you go check out my channel, it's just the link down in the description below. And I also have an Instagram. I don't post on there a whole lot, but it's Peyton on the Radio if you want to go check that out as well.
I'll be sure to plug those links and handles in the video description down below. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's been a pleasure catching up with you, and hopefully we have a chance to work together in the near future.
Yeah, for sure, man. This was a blast. Can't wait to do it again. Thanks.
Once again, Peyton, thank you so much for joining me on the channel. Absolute pleasure talking to you and really exploring things from the perspective of an Edmonton Oilers fan. So guys, let's show Peyton some love. Go to his channel, give him a subscribe there, and he would certainly appreciate that. And stick around here because we're going to have all sorts of content throughout the rest of the regular season, through the postseason, do some live streaming as well. So make sure you stay in the loop, hit the notification bell, subscribe if you haven't already. See the video description down below if you want to keep up with me on social media or pick up some Twisted Wrister Hockey merch. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Nick. I'll catch you Twisters later. Ciao.